Willy and DMase, 1025, 1063 The Game, broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Willy Donick with Adam Vingan. Derek Mason will join us in the next segment, taking care of some very important Derek Mason things. But for now, it's me and Willy and Nick Frazier. How is everybody doing on this fine Wednesday?
I am doing well, reflecting a little bit, as we all do on this day, on September 11th.
Of course.
Still, something that we'll always reflect on when the calendar hits this date. For me, it's something, and one of my good teammates, good friends from Vanderbilt baseball, Jeff Martin. We have a big text chain of the. We call ourselves the original Vandy Boys, the pre-Tim Corbin era, right? There's a bunch of us that have joined this thing over the last few years. But a teammate of ours, Mark Hindy, who was such a wonderful personality, left-handed reliever, a walk-on who had just maybe the best work ethic on the team, best attitude on the team, worked his way up the chain to get pitching innings, was not a just attended Vanderbilt as a student, really, walked on and won a job. He was one of the people in the Cantor Fitzgerald building working there in the World Trade Center when the plane hit. And so we just lived it that day, wondering, like everybody else, was he up there? And, they had to deduce that he was eventually after the days and days of searching. Just, so many stories from that. We all have our different memories of that day, whether you just sat there like I did and watched it unfold, and then you try to check on everybody who lives up there. My brother was living in New York at the time, so checking on him and finding him took some time. But, so much went on that day. So I'm glad that every September 11th we do take a minute to reflect and remember that day for many, many reasons.
Yes, absolutely. Hard to believe it has been 23 years since that somber day, and we will always remember the impact it had on our nation. But this came across my timeline earlier, Willy, and of all people, I think you will appreciate this. When I think about sports in September 11th, the first thing that came to mind was Mike Piazza's home run for the Mets in the first baseball game on New York soil after the attacks on September 11th.
That is, they actually made a very good 30 for 30 out of that. And they have Mark DeRosa. They have a number of players who grew up in that area that played on the teams. I think John Franco's in there. But yeah, memorable night when they finally did resume playing baseball. And that fall of 2001 was an extremely memorable, march to the playoffs and then great postseason. This was the year after the Subway Series in New York, where the Yankees and Mets, and sadly, my Mets lost to the Yankees. And I had to wear Paul Kuharsky's Greg Nettles Yankees shirt to the Frank Wycheck show. That hurt. I got to say that hurt.
Just for one day?
Just for one day, thankfully. But it was a show that was out in public. It stings to this day. But in 2001, the uplifting home run of Mike Piazza is just some of the things you love about baseball. It's a great 30 for 30 if you ever get a chance to see it. It's probably going to be rotating, I would think, today on one of the ESPN channels, or if you have the ESPN Plus and you want to sort of get the vibe, remember, reflect, all of that stuff. It's got all of that. It's great.
We will talk about the Titans Week 2 matchup against the New York Jets throughout the show. Jonathan Hutton will join us at noon. Mitch Light will join us at 1 to talk college football. But Willy, you sent this my direction this morning. The NFL has set its Week 1 ratings record, averaging 21 million viewers per game. The most watched Week 1 on record. ESPN and the Associated Press, right? The league and Nielsen said Wednesday morning that the per game average on TV and digital platforms was a 12% increase over last year. Nielsen began electronic measurement of viewing in 1988. What's most impressive about that number is the fact that you need every streaming service under the sun in order to watch NFL football. You need Peacock, you need YouTube TV, you might need God knows what else to be able to watch the NFL. Amazon. Yeah, you need every streaming service known to man in order to watch football. And apparently, it didn't make a lick of difference, at least according to this. All told, 123 million people saw at least part of one game, its highest total for an opening week since 2019. So
123 million people saw at least part of one game. Now just stop for a second there. And I think that's the trick of the NFL, is that they have enough of the games available to the home market and to somebody's market that you will get at least one game, and I guess at least 3 games free, even if you don't even have cable. If you have the simplest, you just got the old rabbit ears. So that's how you get that number up there, and it's astonishing to me that it still goes up. It's like I kept thinking at some point over these last few years it's going to saturate, and it'll maybe it just won't be trend. It'll trend down a little bit. Everything goes in cycles, it seems like, but they don't ever seem to cycle down.
I'm curious about that number, because with the new YouTube TV, they have the quad screen. Is that because I'm talking?
Is it times 4? Do you get a 4 times?
I guess.
I don't know.
That's what I'm guessing.
The multi-view, I believe, is what it is called.
Yeah, and they have like 4 different games going on at the same time. So I wonder if those ratings are based off of each game individually on one screen, or something like
that is a technicality. I do wonder how they calculate it.
I would like to know
because
what
in
at
theory,
least
if
one
you watched 30 minutes on the, what did you call it, the multi-view?
Yes.
So if the 3 of us watched Nick's multi-view for 30 minutes, we watched parts of 4 games.
See?
But we only watched for 30 minutes. And then you've got the one guy who does the traditional model of when noon starts, you're watching the first game, and then you maybe go rake leaves for a couple minutes, come back and you watch the second game, and then you eat dinner, chill a little bit, and then you flip on the Sunday night. And like, there's that guy who's watching literally 9 hours of football or close to it, but he's only watched 3 games.
I want to know what part
you get what I'm putting
of one game
parts
is.
Quote parts of.
I want to know what part of one game is.
That's a good
5
question.
minutes, 10 minutes.
I'm sure there's something that qualifies that. I'm sure it's not just flipping across.
I have to say, I can't watch the multi-view. I don't have
like
the attention span to watch 4 games at once on one television. If I'm at a sports bar and there's one TV with one game next to another TV with another game, I feel like I can manage that. But one box with 4 different games, I can't do it. I don't have the attention to do it all.
I can't either. I like one game I'm watching and one game I'll flip to. And of course, now the red zone, any commercial break, you go to the red zone and you soak that up. And so it's endless. But I can't do the quad box. I don't.
Really?
You guys started to get me on that on the Olympics. I can't do it.
That was pretty cool during the Olympics. That was pretty cool. I mean, for the quad box, for me, it's
how do you focus on 4 games? You can't do it.
Here's the thing, Willie. As a fantasy owner, I have certain players on certain teams. So this is how I dedicate my quad box. 3 of the games are actual games to watch. The 4th one is red zone, and then the regular TV is the Titans game. So
you're going 5, really. It's really a 5.
Yes. It's regularly a 5, yes.
I see plenty of pictures of people on social media. It's like, all right, I'm ready for the game. And it's the big screen, then the iPad, then the phone. I can't do that. I am a single screen experience kind of guy. I want to watch what's on my television, or if I'm not by a television, if I'm watching on my computer, I can't focus on multiple things at once. When it comes to watching television, I can't. So kudos to those of you who can. But when I see that set up, I mean, I'm sure I saw it on the morning of week 1. It's like, here's my TV. Here are my 2 iPads. Here's my extra little TV that I dug out of the basement that still has the rabbit ears. I can't do it.
It really is a ritual, though. It's amazing how it just continues to grow.
Nick, you sent something our way that I thought was quite interesting. So Deshaun Watson is in the news for multiple reasons. One, he had a terrible game for the Cleveland Browns against the Dallas Cowboys. He's also facing a new civil lawsuit after being accused of sexual assault and battery while on a date 4 years ago. But apparently people have sussed out that he has a burner account now on Twitter.
That is correct.
Now, this has not
allegedly.
this has not been confirmed
No.
or verified, right? But this is, and you sent this thing, and I have to laugh because I don't know who it is that is on this conspiracy theory, but the guy's name, whoever the title is, Larry Bickerstaff. So I don't know where that comes from, but
Leroy.
I'm sorry, Leroy Bickerstaff. And Leroy has got the classic burner thing where it's not there's not a picture of Leroy.
Any relation to JB Bickerstaff by chance, the basketball coach?
Or
Leroy
his, what is it? His, like, there's generations of Bickerstaff. So there was the Bernie Bickerstaff was a coach for a long time. I think Blair. I think his son is the guy you're talking about. And then there was one of Vanderbilt's new coach had a Bickerstaff playing for James Madison last year. Pretty good. So it's a big basketball family.
A proud lineage of Bickerstaffs.
I don't know that Leroy is one of those Bickerstaffs. There's no evidence to say yes or no. But what it is this guy strings together these people that are, you know, as you would expect, all over Deshaun Watson as he's fumbling around and not playing well on Sunday. And then Leroy is always right there, right behind all of the trolls with a very encouraging, hey, Deshaun's not that bad. Hey, you know, if you block for him, he'll make the play. It's just one after another after another. And so people suspect that there could be some tomfoolery here, some shenanigans.
My first thought went to Kevin Durant, because Kevin Durant was infamously outed as using a burner account to defend himself several years ago because he sent out a couple of tweets from his verified account in which he referred to himself in the third person. Like he saw someone, like I was going to say slander, but slander is said, not written. Libel him, I suppose. Denigrate him on social media, and forgot to switch out of his verified account and replied back to that person, hey, Kevin Durant's not so bad. What are you talking about? From his @KDTrey5 or whatever.
And he admitted.
And he ultimately admitted it, I think. There was no avoiding that at that point. He had been outed. But burner accounts are interesting. They're one of the Colangelos.
Yeah, speaking of basketball families, Brian Colangelo, who, not Jerry Colangelo, but I think there is a relation there. He was the general manager of the 76ers, and he got busted. And I think it was his wife was in cahoots with him with a burner account that was supporting all of the trades and the maneuvers that the 76ers were making. I can't remember if this was in the middle of their super tank years. Remember when they tanked to get guys like Joel Embiid and I guess Ben
Trust
Simmons.
The process, Willie. Trust the process.
They went through some very lean times. And then obviously they've had some very good teams once that took form, but it took a long time. But he was outed, and he got fired because he was giving out like inside information to defend himself as the burner. And that, that's taken it to a whole new level there. But you got to believe that through the years, there have been various burners by whether it's the actual person or just a close confidant, a family member, a close friend, the defending burner. And I do wonder if is that a good thing or like, do you think if it's done right and you are beneath the surface, it can be effective to fend off trolls? I've often wondered that.
No, because you don't feed the trolls. That's the whole point.
Okay.
Is you ignore them as best you can. The mute button on Twitter is a wonderful thing.
Okay.
Because if you block somebody, it gives that person the satisfaction that you block them. That is a badge of honor.
Okay.
I'm
with you on that.
But the mute, you don't have to see that person, and they don't know that you can't see it. That's how you do it.
But I have often wondered, though, a sensible, smart person and a clandestine person, right? Because you have to do this like Kevin Durant. He busted himself because he just slipped up and didn't get out of his burner account, and he kept his real account, and he outed himself.
Right. He replied to people in the third person on his official account, his verified account. So he must have forgotten to switch over from his real account to whatever his burner account name was. Chunky Lover 53. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. So I still think, though, if I do wonder if it's a smart tweeter and you do it right and you're not just busting on people, right? You're just trying to point out things. Can it sway the mob away from and get the intended goal, which is to get the trolls to chill? Or is there just absolutely no controlling the trolls?
There's no
matter
controlling the
what you do?
trolls. There's no controlling the trolls. There's
Okay.
absolutely no
Because
controlling.
I have wondered. I think probably it's a natural thought of anybody. It's like, okay, what if I create a secret identity and I'll be the guy that counter attacks all of these things? But
Willie, the trolls are like hyenas. You give them any bit of grace, they're just going to just
if anybody has
munch.
Actual ways to combat trolls on social media, that person, deserves everything, because I have not, I don't engage. I think that's the easiest thing to do. Not that people are regularly trolling me, but I choose not to engage. But if you're Will Levis, for example, Will Levis has been taking it on the chin.
I'm guessing he got trolled.
So, he's been trolled.
Yeah.
I mean, we know it. We haven't really been doing the trolling, but we have been talking negatively about his performance.
Yeah.
But there's been plenty of trolling of Will Levis over the past few days. And we'll get to someone.
Now, okay. And so what do you consider?
Segment.
This is another thing. What do you consider across the line trolling as opposed to, because on our show, are we being critical? Yes. Because, and for obvious reasons,
I'd like to think it's constructive.
Constructive.
It's constructive
is the word. But, there are trolls on Twitter that are just relentless and senseless. And of course, they're anonymous. So they just fire away and say whatever. So is there a Will Levis burner out there that is not Will himself, but maybe is there somebody fighting for Will in the Leroy Bickerstaff kind of role? And what would you name this guy?
I would probably name that person like Duke's Mayo Rules, because you can't say Hellman's because it would give away that it's Will Levis. No free shouts, I know, but Duke's Mayo was the only thing I could think of at the time. Hellman's would be too on the
obvious.
nose. Yes.
I don't know if you have a solid first name like a Kyle or a I don't know, a Johnny Hellman. Johnny Hellman, I think would pass.
I guess
the Hellmans can't be in there though, because it's clearly it's connected to Levis.
Well, that's the thing. If you take off the S and just put Hellman, then you have Johnny Hellman. Nobody will know who it is. Post a different picture of somebody you don't know who it is. It's Johnny Hellman.
Billy Jeans is one I thought of a lot, but that's a little bit of a giveaway. But are you like, you almost, if you're too obvious about it, people are like, well, that's surely not him. But I wonder, what would be your strategy if you were going to create a burner account for Will Levis? I'd love to hear from some people that see this phenomenon and wonder about it. And does anybody know Leroy Bickerstaff? I would like to know. Is anybody from Cleveland? Do they know Leroy? Is he a person, or do we think this is actually a Deshaun Watson burner?
We're putting out an APB for Leroy Bickerstaff. If you know where Leroy Bickerstaff is, please let us know. But I mean, Deshaun Watson may be the only quarterback in the NFL who's been getting it worse than Will Levis specifically on the field. You cannot ignore the off the field allegations when it comes to Deshaun Watson, considering his history and what he's been alleged of doing and all of the settlements that he came to with the women that claimed that he assaulted them.
Yeah.
There is a new one. But strictly on the field in this particular case, Deshaun Watson had just as bad of a game, I feel like, as Will Levis. Now, I don't think he made the mistake that Will Levis made in throwing the pick six that cost the Titans the game. But the Browns fans did boo him off the field, the whole team. But Deshaun Watson, considering the contract, and as Derek pointed out the other day, the good news for Deshaun Watson is that he doesn't have the most guaranteed money anymore now that Dak Prescott has, I believe, more guaranteed money than Deshaun Watson. But that contract has to be one of the worst contracts ever given to a major North American professional athlete.
And it continues to get worse because this is the beginning of 3 more years. So they have this year and then 2 more years after this year of that money, which is all guaranteed. So there's no getting out of it. And I do wonder, how bad would he have to play for them to go to, guess who? A guy we've talked about a lot on this show the last couple of days, Jameis Winston, who is waiting in the wings, hoping for another shot. That is going to be an interesting plot from a lot of different angles.
I saw a graphic the other day from the 33rd team. We referenced the 33rd team yesterday and talking about Jameis Winston. And it was just a graphic of the Browns-Texans trade revisited and all of the draft picks that the Texans received trading Deshaun Watson to the Browns. And the players that the Texans were able to acquire either by drafting them with those picks or trading those picks to get certain players. From that trade, the Texans, among other players, have received Will Anderson, Tank Dell, and Stephon Diggs, either by drafting players with those picks or using those picks in other trades.
Yeah.
Will Anderson, Tank Dell, and Stephon Diggs, among others. But those are the 3 headliners. That the Texans' rebirth has a lot to do with that trade.
There's no doubt about it. And the early returns on the new moves that they made are off the charts good. I was every podcast I like to listen to with people that like to do insights around the league. Man, everybody's glowing about really the Colts and the Texans, because either team could have won that game. But the Texans and the way Mixon played, Diggs looked good. I mean, they look like they've only added to what they did last year, which is scary for the Titans.
Stephanie on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, says, how does anyone have the kind of time to troll? I can barely keep up with one Twitter account, and I don't have the attention span I think would be necessary to perform at high troll standards. I would love to know what high troll standards are.
I think it is a job. I think it is a job to be a troll. You've got to have a lot of dedication to do it right. And that's why I'm asking the question, can the trolls be countered? Because of their dedication, the dedicated trolls. Can you counter them? Can you get to them? Can you sway their thinking? Or is it impossible in this day and age? I just would love to hear somebody try to answer that question.
Just when you think you squash one troll, 5 generate in their place.
It is like that nightmare movie that's what happens, right? They multiply.
Right. It's also like Gremlins, don't feed the trolls after midnight. There's probably a lot of...
I did see that movie.
There's probably a lot of...
In the theater,
yes,
scary.
There's probably a lot of that. It is almost Halloween after all. 615-737-1025. Our phone and text lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Coming up next, we mentioned Will Levis, whether or not he has a burner account. But Will Levis and his decision to throw the ball that ultimately led to the Titans' demise. He's getting it from everywhere, including a legendary figure. We'll get to that next. Willy Donick, Adam Vingan, 102.5, 106.3, The Game. Willy and DMase, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Willy Donick with Adam Vingan here with you on Wednesday. Matthew in Nashville asks, where does the Deshaun Watson trade rank for you? With the Herschel Walker, Russell Wilson, Carson Wentz to Indy, Jerome Bettis to Pittsburgh trades? I guess he's asking, where does the Deshaun Watson trade rank in terms of all-time bad trades in the NFL?
Disastrous trades. Yeah, it's moving up the charts, especially because I think everybody keeps waiting to see if the light will go back on and the health can come back on. But there's less and less hope. And then on top of it, as you referenced, and we had a texter asking about it, I read about it. This latest allegation on top. Now, you would think after all that he went through and had pretty severe penalties, pretty severe legal fees, I would think, that the last thing that you would do is what he is alleged to have done, which is basically do the same predatory stuff, except this time just to a regular date and not a licensed massage therapist, if I'm going to put it in a nutshell. But it'll just have you shaking your head. I don't know if the allegation is true or not, but on top of everything that he's trying to do to rebuild his career, he's not doing a very good job of taking care of things off the field.
Let's see what happens with the Texans. As I mentioned, among the players that the Texans acquired in that trade in terms of the draft picks or using those draft picks to make other trades, Will Anderson, Tank Dell, and Stephon Diggs. Let's see what happens with the Texans. If the Texans continue to take off and they win somewhat soon, I mean, that Deshaun Watson trade could get even higher on that list of worst trades.
The Cowboys winning the 2 Super Bowls and going to a third, that's still bearing the fruits of that, of the Walker trade. It was a big part of that, right? Their early 90s run. So the Texans have to cash this in with playoff success, I think, to get it up there. But it's looking like it's going to be a contender for rivaling the Herschel Walker trade, which everybody references. It has its own name. That's how bad the Herschel Walker trade turned out to be, is because it's the first trade that pops in your mind. It's like Bobby Bonilla. When somebody gets a lot of deferred money, it's the Bobby Bonilla thing. You know that you're in your own category when you have the name associated with something like that.
Around here, it's the Martin Erat trade, right? You remember?
I guess you could say that.
You remember that to an extent.
Right. Or a Predator fan would certainly know what you're talking about if you said he Jimmy V'd them. Like if a guy goes through his college eligibility and elects not to sign with his team that drafted him, you could say, hey, so-and-so got Jimmy V'd. Right?
Yes, I suppose you could.
Yeah.
But we'll see what happens with the Deshaun Watson fallout, but it's not looking good for Deshaun Watson in the Cleveland Browns. It did not look good for Will Levis and the Tennessee Titans on Sunday, as we all know, losing 24-17 to the Chicago Bears. Will Levis with what he called a boneheaded play. That's putting it mildly. I'm sure other people have used much more colorful language to describe it over the past few days. But Will Levis with the boneheaded interception that led to the loss. And I believe it was yesterday on the Pat McAfee show, even Bill Belichick was getting his licks in on Will Levis.
And then if you can make a play, but don't make a play, make a bad play. So, that's the one that always got me when the players said, well, I was trying to make a play. I was like, well, how about try to make a good one then? Make a bad play. So like the play that Levis had, where he gets out of the pocket, he flips the ball, underhand, backhand, whatever it was. And that's just, even if you hit it, what do you really have? Not much. And then if you don't hit it, then, you lose the game. So it's just, there's no upside to that play. There's only downside. And, it's just, that's just a terrible decision. And Tom and I have talked a million times about, if you complete this pass, what's the upside? You gain 1 yard, you gain 2 yards. All right, you guys going to get tackled anyway, like the play we just saw in Tennessee. I mean, what if he had completed that? What's the upside? 2 yards? What's the downside? Lose the game. Like that's you just can't make those kind of decisions. And even if that ball had been complete, there's no upside to it. And so, Tom did a great job of, risk management and, cut his losses. And so, rather than turn the ball over, all right, you lose a couple of yards and you get sacked, but at least we can gain our field position back by punting on third down.
That was Bill Belichick on the Pat McAfee show. And I just want to say, for someone who was so media averse throughout his legendary coaching career, Bill Belichick has an awful lot of media jobs right now. The guy is everywhere. He's on Pat McAfee. He's on the Manning cast. He's on Inside the NFL or whatever I think it's called Inside the NFL. He's all over the place. For a guy who was a big old grump to reporters for 2 decades, he's awfully media savvy all of a sudden.
It is quite the turnaround. I will say that I have seen him on specials with the NFL Network and things. He does have, I've always known that he's got this in him, this ability to analyze and articulate if he wants to. It just shows you that he intentionally made no effort for all those years. He just intentionally was a jerk, I'm saying nothing. I don't care what anybody thinks, because he's always had this ability to articulate. Now, that analysis there, Adam, that's really kind of a Captain Obvious, right? We all could have sort of made that same assessment of that play, and we did. I will say I disagree with him on one thing. I don't think Levis was even trying to complete the pass. I think he was simply, he thought, and he thought wrong, but I think he believed he could shovel the ball out of bounds, right? And avoid the sack instinctively. And it was bad. And he had some funny one-liners, like, what's the upside? What's the downside? Obviously, it was a bonehead play. I don't think he was trying to complete the pass. I see what he's saying, though. And what's the best case? You complete the pass and you're still way short of the first down. We punt. I think he thought maybe the yardage was worth trying to throw it out of bounds, but it was terrible. Like he had 2 or 3 chances before he actually tried the last minute shovel to get rid of the ball, or just to tuck it and take the sack. So it was an absolute worst case scenario. But I'm glad to see Bill's on the scene and actually watched a little bit of the Titans game.
Well, I think with Bill Belichick, as it relates to his many media responsibilities, I think he's just trying to show a softer side of himself so that when the next coaching cycle comes up, people aren't as worried that the gruff Bill Belichick is going to come in and take over the organization, which maybe it'll work. But I have a feeling that once Bill Belichick becomes a head coach again, we're going to see the Bill Belichick.
He's going to revert?
Yes.
I that's interesting, because Bill Parcells did that, right? He retired. He did some TV, and then he came back. I don't know that he wasn't like Belichick. He was more, I'm taking the press conference to you. It was a little bit more like Mike Vrabel, but I think Parcells with the New York media had a unique ability to sort of have the media on eggshells a bit. Like, be careful how you ask this question, because if it comes out wrong and I don't like it, I'm coming right back at you. And so he had that, and he knew it. That was his tactic. And Belichick, of course, watched Parcells week in and week out for those 80s Giants teams. So I don't think Parcells changed his tune. He didn't have to, really. I thought he was pretty good as a studio analyst there. One guy that came to mind, though, as you were saying this, from the hockey side, Rick Tocchet, right, also has that kind of nasty player, competitive player, hard-nosed, but very articulate, hard-nosed coached. I thought he did a very good job, surprisingly well, on the TNT panel. And I do think he had a little different tact with the media when he came back to coach the Canucks. I noticed it in the playoff series last year. I think he has a little bit more feel for what the media has to do. And I appreciate that, right? Because that Vancouver media, in its own way, is a little bit like a New York media for football. Everybody in the town is all over that team. Everybody's going to ask questions from all angles. There's a lot of people, and you have to be ready every time you take the podium, even if it's just a regular Tuesday night game in January where both teams are, just kind of rolling along in the dog days. It's still the biggest thing going, and every press conference means something.
I'll tell you one coach it didn't work for in the hockey world, John Tortorella. Remember when John Tortorella did some work, I think, with TSN. Was he on ESPN?
He was on
recently?
ESPN.
I was thinking of even further back, like before maybe even coached the Rangers. He was on like after he was done with the Lightning, I have this right? I think it was Lightning, then the Rangers. But he was on
Correct.
TSN a while ago. But he was on. You're right. I actually had forgotten about that. He was on ESPN somewhat recently before being hired by the Philadelphia Flyers. And I like John Tortorella as an analyst, but it didn't change his perspective of the media.
No, he went back to the Flyers and had a lot of less than 60-second statements and things like that.
Yes, absolutely. But you know what? That wasn't the only stray that Will Levis caught on the Pat McAfee show this week. I think this was from Monday. Pat McAfee, we listened yesterday, the guys on the 33rd Team podcast, Steve Palazzolo and Sam Monson compare Will Levis to Jameis Winston. Listen who Pat McAfee compares Will Levis to from earlier this week.
There was a point where it was either 17-10, maybe 17-16, and he was going up and down the sideline screaming his head off. So maybe has to figure that out a little bit. But to your point, they kind of went and got the best offensive weapon available in Ridley and the best defensive weapon available in Snead. And then they got the best center, you could argue, in free agency too, in Cushenberry. So if they're all in on Levis, he better not throw backhanded pick sixes to lose games.
Yeah, and that was it was an impressive backhanded pick six.
Oh, he can make that pitch, Coach.
You know what it looked like?
Who's that?
2 sprains.
Oh,
all I can think of is this guy's too tough. This guy wants to make too many plays. He's got that Carson Wentzism in him.
Sure.
You know, because Carson would never go down. No play was over. I can do whatever. And he was incredibly talented and was able to do all those things. And when he's playing great football, he was through the roof. But then whenever he was making some of those decisions, it was like, this is professional football. You can't be doing that. Whenever I saw that backhanded toss, I'm like,
wow.
Oh, no. You better not have that same ism that Carson had, because that'll lead you into some bad spots. Now, with that being said, if his upside is anywhere near what Carson Wentz's upside is, I think everybody in Tennessee is pumped about that. Just got to manage the game a little bit.
Yeah, I still believe in him.
They still believe. They believe. They're not writing them off.
Did I hear Pat McAfee refer to Carson Wentz as 2 sprains?
I wasn't sure who he was talking about for a second there. Then I was like, oh, yeah.
Well, here's why. Because Carson Wentz, when he played for the Colts, remember, he played a game against the Titans with 2 sprained ankles. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
And that must be what he's referring to. So,
and the Titans won that game. That was early in the season.
It was a week 3 game.
Yeah. In the Carson Wentz that did not end up well at all.
It was bad.
Yeah, that was not good.
But they still believe, Willie.
They still believe.
They still believe in Levis.
In recent days, we've heard Will Levis compared to Carson Wentz with the Colts specifically, Jameis Winston, and I actually like what Derek said yesterday when we were bringing up Jameis Winston, that Jameis Winston at least gets you the touchdowns. Now, there's a lot you have to manage with Jameis Winston, but he'll get you the touchdowns. But overall, though, that is not the company I would want to keep as a quarterback in terms of, who am I being compared to right now? Late era Carson Wentz. I know Carson Wentz is still in the NFL, which was a shock to me when I found out he was backing up Patrick Mahomes. But Colts era Carson Wentz and Jameis Winston, it's not a glowing endorsement.
No, it's not. And when we come back, Adam, I have had some thoughts of what to do about it, because you kind of have this, well, let's see the upside. Let's see the Riverboat Gambler where you throw 3 touchdowns, right? Like we did at the very first game that he had. But with the way the Titans defense is playing, potentially, what's the best way to do this? Like, do you go the other way and just say, you know what? Let's throw the ball like 14 times and just hand it off a bunch and take the game out of his hands a little bit more, if that's possible. Or can he even possibly do that?
615-737-1025, our phone and text lines, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. We'll get to that next. Tune into 94.9 The Fan today as the Nashville Sounds take on Memphis. Pregame at 6:20, first pitch at 6:35, with coverage also available on 94.9 The Fan app and at 949thefan.com. Sounds baseball on 94.9 The Fan, presented by Twin Peaks Family Leisure, 5 Points Roofing, and Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning. Willy and DMase, 1025, 1063 The Game. Adam Vingan, Willy Donick, Derek Mason joining us just in time. Derek Mason is here. We'll get his thoughts on all of our thoughts.
Can we get a drum roll for DMace's entry into the show? Like that.
It's Derek Mason,
ladies and gentlemen,
Thank
from Michigan State University.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody. Hey, thank you. I'll be at Zany's 2030 now.
If that career as a dentist doesn't work out, stand-up
Exactly.
comic is
Man
good.
of many talents. What was the first year you were going to be at Zany's?
I thought first year was 2025, which is
Yeah.
this upcoming year, but then we pushed it back a little bit.
It keeps getting pushed
Yeah,
back.
it keeps getting pushed back because it's just like I want to do one big show, and we're trying to figure out, some renovations within Zany's to pack like 1 million people.
And then you became a
Yeah.
dentist too, so we had to push it back.
so I had to push
time.
it back. I went
Yeah.
to dental school, man. I had to push it back. I have the DDS in my name.
We all know what it feels like to put your dreams on the back burner. So maybe one day you will be a stand-up comic. But Derek, before you came in, Willie and I were discussing some of the comparisons that have been made to Will Levis in the past few days. We talked about Jameis Winston yesterday. We played the clip from the Pat McAfee show. I believe it was on Monday. Pat McAfee comparing Will Levis to two sprains, Carson Wentz. Not the greatest company to keep, right? I feel like, although I did make mention of your point about Jameis Winston yesterday, that Jameis Winston's going to get you the touchdowns. It's about managing everything else. But Willie was about to discuss ways that maybe Will Levis could be managed to mitigate some of the Winston Wentzisms that Will Levis might be showing.
And so we're going to, Callahan's going to have his press conference coming up here during the next hour. We're going to talk to Jonathan Hutton. We'll hear what Callahan has to say. But I think we all know how bad that mistake was.
Yeah.
The question is, what is their plan with him? What's his plan to try to get back up off the canvas and do something? So do you think that it makes more sense to say, look, our defense played really well. Let's go into a little bit more of old school, run the ball, punt, be opportunistic, and let's try to win the game 17-10 just while he finds himself? Or do you go in with kind of the same thing that you've been working on all summer with him? I think it's a really interesting thing. Do you scale back a little bit and play more conservative? Because A, he just got scarred, right? His confidence could be down. And B, you might have a defense that's good enough to win a very tight game.
Yeah, if you look at, let's just look at, say, the last, 15, 20 years in the NFL in regards to quarterbacks. There are several, methods that, may work in regards to getting a quarterback, easing them in. Some teams like to, allow the quarterback to sit and wait. We saw that, in several instances. You look at Jordan Love. Hell, you can even go back to Aaron Rodgers. He sat for 2 years. They wanted Justin Herbert to sit, but
was it Tyrod Taylor?
Tyrod Taylor, ended up getting injured. And so
punctured the lung before
exactly.
the game.
So that forced him into playing. Joe Flacco, I go back to that. He wasn't set to be the starter, but because Troy Smith got very ill, they put him in, but they brought him along slowly. Look at Ben Roethlisberger. They brought him along slowly. So there are several different ways you can do this in regards to how do I maximize the most in my young quarterback without putting him in a position that he's going to fail. You see what's happening in Carolina. You don't want that to happen here.
It's
in
a
Nashville.
disaster.
Exactly. You see what almost happened in Jacksonville with Trevor Lawrence. So there could be several ways to bring about your young quarterback. But in this situation, there's two problems with that. One, he's not young. And two, he's played enough games to me to understand you can't do some of these things that you did. Again, it's not the interception. Has nothing to do really with the interception. It has everything to do with, we just discussed this in the third quarter. to not do anything that was going to put our offense at a disadvantage. The defense is playing great. They haven't sniffed a drop against our defense. Let's just not mess up the game. Well, if that's indeed the case, I put a lot of the blame on Brian Callahan too.
Well,
because run the football. If you are telling your quarterback in the third quarter, just don't do anything, well, run the damn football.
And I wonder if presented with the same type of game on Sunday, will we see a marked
he's going to
difference?
run the football. He's
Because
going to run it.
I thought it was very revealing that Brian Callahan used the word. He says, I was surprised. So I think at the end of training camp, he felt better about Will Levis being able to manage those situations better.
But the
the
last rounds are not going in preseason. That's what I don't understand when he says, well, I felt really comfortable. And I'm sorry, Willie, for cutting you off with that.
No,
but
go.
For him saying I was really comfortable with what he was doing and I felt he had it. You were not playing. I know you know, Seattle came in here and I know they gave you a little bit to sort of go back and, and digest and go over with your quarterback. But again, it didn't mean anything because regardless if you scored 80 touchdowns against them, it didn't mean anything, To me, once you get into live games, when it really means something, that's when we need to decide whether he's the quarterback or not, or whether I'm surprised that he did something or not. The training camps and all that other stuff is just sort of like the pre-test. And when we do pre-test, a lot of times, I know I did well in pre-test. There was no pressure. It was just like, okay, I know, okay, yeah. And then when the test came, the wording was different. And I'm like, oh, damn. Now I really got to think. So he should have known that was just a pre-test. And in pre-test, some people do well. But then when it's the real test, and if you miss 3 or 4, that's going to determine whether you get a A or an F, then that means something. The pressure tends to ramp up a lot. You don't know how a person is going to react until they're in that situation. What we saw from Will Levis last year and what we have seen in his first game, again, I said it yesterday, I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but yet still I am recognizing the things that I'm seeing that haven't changed in a year and a half. He's 25 years old, and he's doing some of the same things that he did when he was in college.
If pre-SAT scores were, if you could qualify and send your pre-SAT scores for college applications, I would have been an Ivy Leaguer.
Really? I don't believe that. But when I look at Adam and everything that he's done as far as journalism, no, he probably got like a 29 or 30 on the ACT.
See, I didn't take ACTs where I live. It was the SAT. But I did end up taking the actual SAT like 2 or 3 times because you can combine the scores and take your highest scores. But if pre-SATs counted as much as SATs, I would have gone much. I would maybe gone to a much better school. 615-737-1025. But I ended up here, so that's okay. 615-737-1025. We'll get Jonathan Hutton's thoughts on this and more coming up next. Willie Donick, Derek Mason with Adam Vingan, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Willy and DMase, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Willy Donick, Derek Mason, with Adam Vingan, and joined by our friend Jonathan Hutton from Hot Mic with Hutton and Withrow, as he does every Wednesday at noon. And Hutton, I saw an interesting tweet from you today that I'd love for you to expand on here with us. You pointed out in the last 3 seasons combined, the Titans have the NFL's worst second half offense. The Titans are 32nd at 6.2 points per game and 32nd with 129.9 yards per game or per half, I should say, over the past 3 seasons. And then you continue, quarterback 1, Levis must produce results that finish games, not lose games, after fighting for the halftime lead. Now, Will Levis wasn't starting over those 3 seasons, as we know.
Sure.
Mike Vrabel was the coach for part of that time. But what has been the primary issue for the Titans in the second half over that sample? And how can Will Levis correct that for the Titans?
Well, I mean, Levis did play in some of these games, right, that I'm referencing. But
yes.
This is the real, I mean, to me, this is the big issue that they've got to figure out and that Levis must navigate and lead them out of this desert. Because, I mean, since the start of the 2002 season, the Titans have scored the 4th fewest points, and they average the 3rd fewest passing yards in the NFL. Now they're going to this new era. But Sunday felt like the same old Titans. 17 points with an offense that no one believes is going to score in the second half, a team with major special teams issues, a team that can't hide their weakness on the offensive line, and a team with a defense that can overcome all of that and put them in a position to win the football game. But the biggest issue is second half offense. And again, they failed to score once again over the final 2 quarters. And we're going back in this timeline, Adam, 35 games. And I mentioned the last 3 seasons, but I mean, that it's not even really a competition. There's 2 points better. They're 2 points worse, than the 31st ranked team in second half offense. So if Levis is the future, and last season felt okay, considering the challenges with the roster, injuries at wide receiver, terrible offensive line, Levis got hurt, if factoring those things in, there's still reason for hope and optimism, but the time to find out is now. And if you look at the Levis from the Atlanta game, where he showed tremendous promise in his first career start, he's in a group of 27 quarterbacks with 200 or more pass attempts. And only one of those 26 other quarterbacks has fewer touchdown passes than Will Levis. It's Bryce Young in Carolina. So only 2 quarterbacks have been sacked more than he has. So we can point to the offensive line for some of those issues. And it certainly breaks down, it feels like, as the game continues. You've got penalties all over the place. There's a lot of blame to go around last year. But this year, the Titans are rebuilding. They're in the middle of a major roster turnover. But included in all of that is this big decision for the future of quarterback. And there's really no room for excuse making for him if we're going to evaluate him the same way I believe the Titans are evaluating him right now. Because he's been put in a very good position, in terms of being able to prove it with the help around him now compared to last year, where there's plenty of things that went wrong. And it felt like it's not all on the quarterback. Well, now it's all about the quarterback for this franchise. Derrick Henry's gone. So, this franchise first direction for offensive play calling, they've surrounded him with what should be a solid trio wide receiver, a room that's easily 5 deep, 2 running backs who are interchangeable that can catch the football in the backfield. And I've heard a lot, well, it's only his 10th start. Give him time. Give him time. By saying this, I just feel like it's inevitable that we talk our way into this another year saga, when really I think these guys want to hurry up and figure out whether or not Will Levis is going to be the future for Brian Callahan's offense. And Callahan even told us how he felt about it in a blunt way at the presser on Monday. I mean, I appreciate that. It's just something we don't hear from head coaches a lot in terms of their quarterback.
If you were Brian Callahan devising a plan for Will Levis as the Titans prepare for the New York Jets on Sunday, what would you do?
I do exactly what I've been installing all off season. I mean, what's the purpose of all the work that they've put in week 2 to not roll it out? I mean, it's the gaff that he, for whatever reason, they talked about on the sideline, and for whatever reason, Levis goes and plays hero ball when you just eat the sack and, punt it away, let your defense go win the game, because the offense from Chicago is not going to go down and score. All that being said, I mean, the 2 long touchdown drives were nice. There are things in the first half I can point to that looked really good. The 3rd and 15 completion to Calvin Ridley was awesome. It was the first completion of the game, but 3rd down conversion of the game, I should say. Point being, I mean, this is a pass first offense. They've got to figure out and work their receivers into this game. They have to come up with some big plays. He and Ridley have to find their rapport. And, underthrowing balls. I don't know if his arm was grazed on one of those passes, or overthrowing him or sending it out of bounds.
Beer ball, which we learned is the term. Hut. That's what Callahan said. And I do think, in fairness, Darrell Taylor, I didn't even realize, I didn't make the connection that he played for Tennessee. Darrell Taylor had the game of his life.
Yeah,
blocked the
and
punt.
He just got traded.
And he played tremendously well, and he did graze Levis. I went back and looked, and I was surprised that Mark Sanchez did not pick up on that, on the underthrow to Ridley. And they scored. I believe they scored on that drive anyway, didn't they? Wasn't that the 14-play drive?
They went down to score. That was the Chicaconquo touchdown. And Willie, one thing I think we all agree on, Mason. I mean, one thing Levis is not going to do is underthrow a receiver. Right, like that's why
not likely. It is not likely.
The arm was grazed, or he's throwing off balance. But yeah, I mean, I just haven't seen enough with him and Ridley, and all of the offseason. And we've talked about this. Like he's done all of the right things in the offseason to put him in position now to go out and prove it. And the first result was, I mean, when he threw that pick, the meltdown was already kind of going. And when he did that, he's in his own head at that point. I don't know what he was doing. And no one does within that organization. They're just shaking their head going, how do we lose this game?
Yeah, well, you lost it because you didn't do the things necessary on the offensive end in the second half to win
Special
it.
teams too, but yeah.
Special teams bit them in the backside once again, which was a surprise to me. I thought the special teams had gotten a lot better. And again, they could be great this upcoming game.
Sure.
But to do the things that they did special teams wise last week was inexcusable on that part. We'll talk with Jonathan Hutton, Hutton and Withrow. Let's go back to that interception, because the more I think about it, Hut, I put it on the feet of Brian Callahan for this reason.
Okay.
If I got to tell my quarterback, and I get it, he's a young quarterback.
Yeah.
In relations to how many years he's been in the NFL. He's a young quarterback. I get that. But if you got to remind your quarterback in the third quarter what to not do, then you as a coordinator should know what not to do. You should have ran the football consistently, regardless if you got a yard, minus yards, or 5 yards, because what you told your quarterback was the truth. Like, listen, don't do anything that's going to cost us the game. Why? Because the defense is playing great. They haven't sniffed an inch against our defense, especially in the second half. Every point that they've gotten, significant point, has come off of turnovers or special teams. So to me, I put some of the blame on Brian Callahan. If you got to tell your quarterback that in the third quarter, then as a head coach, you should think, it's 3rd and 8, 9, whatever it is, late in the game. The game doesn't seem, it seems like the tide is shifting a little bit. Let me just run the football and play field position.
And punt it away.
Exactly.
Get our defense back out there.
So we can blame Will Levis for the throw.
Oh.
I'm blaming him for the throw because you just discussed it.
Yeah.
But I'm also blaming Brian Callahan because if you just discussed it, then why would you do something that is going to put him in a position where he may make a mistake like that?
Well, so I hear you, but I think Callahan's going up to him with this in mind. His favorite throw from Will Levis was a pass that he admitted he would not want Levis to dropped the pass. but he dropped it in between two Atlanta defenders. It was a bomb down the sideline. He couldn't see Burks. He knew Burks was going to be there. He didn't know that there were two defenders there. That's because he had two defensive linemen in his face. He throws off balance, and he put it right on the money. And Callahan said it was outstanding, like the overall athleticism to pull that off. But he wouldn't want him to force the issue like that. And he said we had to reel him in a bit. So I think it's more reminding him you don't have to force anything. Just take what the defense gives you. The screen game is an extension of their run game, right? Like Will Levis at this point should know not to do what he did. I don't know. I was talking with Bullock Sunday night, KB, and he was like, yeah, he just saw color flash, and he just flipped the ball. And I'm thinking, man, if he's trying to get it out of bounds, he's trying to get it back to the line of scrimmage for intentional grounding or what, I'm like, whatever that is, as much football as that dude has played, they had to be stunned, like shell shocked that he tried to attempted that, and then you see the defender running back for the pick six. I think they were more concerned about him trying to force a 15-yard pass over the middle and getting picked off by safety.
Yeah, and listen, I do understand, from that point, what was being
Doesn't it tell you
said.
the mentality, though, the offense, that they're going to press it a bit with them?
Yeah, it does, but you can't. Here's the problem.
Yeah,
you can't press it when you don't know if you got the quarterback to do that. He hasn't shown you enough to where you can press it. If you have a quarterback that you don't know much about, you try to keep everything in a suitcase. You try to keep everything packed real tight, whether it be in your run game or your pass game. And you don't do things that is going to allow the quarterback to put you in a situation where it's going to be not beneficial to you. But again, I'm sure if it came up again against the Jets, I think Callahan would defer to running the football more, even though we look at this team and we say they got to be a passing team. You got to be a passing team. I understand you got to be a passing team because that's the way it seems like the league is going. But if you don't have the quarterback or the proven quarterback that can that shows you can have a passing attack like that, then you got to wait. You got to bring them on very slowly.
But I see, to me, they don't have the time to just develop him in some slow way.
No, it's not. I'm not saying like develop him. I'm saying do what's necessary to keep your job, Callahan.
Well,
and if you got to run the football all the time, then he's not your quarterback. You see what I'm saying?
If you're not going, if you already know you're going to play it safe, don't you know he's not your quarterback?
Yeah, you do. You do.
So I mean, for all the discussion about it's only been 10 games. Nobody in Las Vegas was, raising their hand and standing on the table for Aiden O'Connell. He was drafted in the 4th round last year. He had 12 touchdown passes in 11 games. That's more than Will Levis. He's no longer starting. Like coaches can figure out where they are with the player. And as much time as they've spent together in the offseason, I think I'm not saying you guys or me here. I just 10 games to me, you kind of get a feel of what the starter's like.
Exactly.
And to me, the benefit of the doubt for him is the new offensive play caller, which is very difficult after 1 year to then jump into another one. And this is all Levis has done throughout his entire college career leading into the NFL. He's always switched coordinators. But this is a guy where they've actually put investment around the quarterback specifically, and we've never seen the organization do that from the offense goes through the quarterback, not the backfield.
We're talking to Jonathan Hutton, Hot Mike with Hutton and Withrow. We're talking Titans. We're going to play you some clips from the Brian Callahan press conference, which is going on right now. So your first thought, Hut, about the matchup with the Jets. The first thing that comes to mind is the best thing that came out of the game in Chicago was that the defense did look exactly like we hoped it would look.
Yeah.
If you're a Titans fan. And it was even beyond like everything that you hoped. You had corners that were improved. You had T. Sweat and Simmons playing together. That was dynamic, which you hoped. You got some good pressure on the quarterback. You had some timely blitzes. It's what you hoped. But
Landry
now you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now you go from playing a quarterback in his first year to a 40-year-old quarterback. And by the way, there have only been 15 quarterbacks in NFL history that have played at age 40. So you talk about a guy that has seen everything. It's Aaron Rodgers. So it's a complete other end of the spectrum. So it's a great test to see what Denard Wilson does to adjust.
Yep. And I think it's a great point because you're trying to confuse and show looks that the rookie has never seen with the speed of the game. And now you're playing chess against one of and you're the first year play caller,
Yeah.
But it is a fascinating matchup. To me, I think the game comes down to which group of corners goes out and plays better than the other. The investments made in the defensive backfield for both teams. I mean, in terms of draft picks or money, the Titans have certainly done that monetarily. This is where I think the game is won or lost because, again, I think the run game itself, they're gonna churn it. I think both teams will. But I mean, Breece Hall is Breece Hall. Ultimately, though, Willie, whenever Rodgers has got to throw the football, can this secondary hold up enough and do it better than the group of receivers in Nashville? And Will Levis trying to come up with some big plays down the field.
Yeah,
it takes a handful of them, but I mean, it's not like quarterback play across the league is all that great. Rodgers, he can still throw it, but man, the numbers certainly don't pop off the sheet.
I think this could be let's see if we can win the game 16-10, almost a Jeff Fisher style. And that is, just as I look at it, and I don't know if you can pull that off against Aaron Rodgers, but I do wonder about this too, specifically Snead. One of the things that they did with him in Kansas City, right, was they followed him. They said, "Oh, you've got the number one receiver, and wherever he goes, you go." Do you think they will do that with Garrett Wilson? Because that's their guy.
Demands it. I think Snead demands it. I think he's that type of dude. I think that's how you are. That's how every number one.
I think that's a huge matchup. I was thinking about that a lot while the Jets were, I thought at times force feeding the ball to Wilson.
And I have some numbers to back that up. In week 4 last season between the Jets and the Chiefs, L'Jarius Sneed lined up against Wilson on 60% of his routes, with 50% of those 24 routes coming in press coverage. So I think you can almost guarantee L'Jarius Sneed will be on Garrett Wilson.
And Denard Wilson will want that too. They have the same mentality. They get after it. One talks a lot more than the other. Sneed's kind of quiet.
Jonathan Hutton from Hot Mike with Hutton and Withrow joining us as he does every Wednesday at noon. Hutton, thank you so much. We'll talk to you next week.
Absolutely. Always enjoy this, guys. You have a great rest of the week and enjoy the football weekend coming up.
Absolutely.
You too, Hutton. Thank you. Jonathan Hutton joining us as he does every Wednesday. Brian Callahan speaking now. We'll bring you the highlights of Brian Callahan's news conference throughout the show. 615-737-1025. Willie Dunnick, Derek Mason with Adam Bingen, 1025-1063, The Game.
Maybe flag it.
Happy Wednesday, and football is back. And what better way to bet on the games than on Zen Sports, people, the new sports book in Tennessee that's bringing your sports betting to a whole new level. And I mean that literally. When you sign up for Zen Sports, you'll automatically earn up to $100, no danger first wager. If your first bet loses, you'll be reimbursed for the amount of your bet up to $100. And for football season, which has started, Zen Sports is launching a revamped betting platform for both college football and the NFL. And what's better, with our new look, Zen Sports will offer daily promotions, including odd boosts, same game parlays, no danger wagers, and much more. Zen Sports also offers a one-of-a-kind VIP reward program. If you qualify, you'll earn monthly comps at sporting events, concerts, and even sportbook bonuses. The VIP program is by invite only, so if you feel that your Zen Sports play qualifies for the VIP consideration, check out the program details and apply at zensports.com/VIP. So what are you waiting for, football fans of all kind? Start betting with Zen Sports, where you will receive true odds on all parlays and an enhanced user experience for all. That should be fun. I know it is. Get going and download their app at zensports.com today. That's Zen Sports, where betting just got better. And remember, gambling problems, call 1-800-889-9789. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 years or older to bet here in Tennessee.
How similar is that for Will as a young player? I mean, he just made his 10th start, and how much of corrections and that improvement of footwork that was mentioned on Monday can only happen in games for a quarterback?
That's really what it is, and you coach off of those clips, and then you hope that when the quarterbacks watch and look back and feel it, he feels the things that we're talking about, which Will does, and so now you have something to work with. Now that they've feel it again. They understand, and then when you make the coaching points, it makes more sense, and then you hope to see it translate, and you work on it in practice and you drill it, and just like anything, you're always drilling something that involves your improvement in the game. We very rarely ever go out there at any position and do drill work that is just to do it. It's all very focused on how do we improve some aspect of where we're playing in the game, what we're asking guys to do. So the drill work's really important. We spend a lot of time thinking about it and how to implement it. And so that part is where you hope to see the improvement in practice. And then he's got to go do it in the game.
That was Tennessee Titans head coach Brian Callahan on Will Levis. Willie Donick, Derek Mason with Adam Vingan here on 102.5, 106.3 The Game. And one thing I'm interested in, one thing that I am interested in as I prepare to watch this game against the Jets on Sunday. The Jets are considered one of the best defenses in the NFL, but it did not look that way against the San Francisco 49ers. I believe they gave up more than 400 total yards. I did see this stat, which jumped off the page from the Elias Sports Bureau. The Jets allowed 8 straight scoring drives. 8 straight scoring drives against the 49ers. How rare is that? It's the first time over the last 45 seasons for the Jets. That's as far back as their records go in this category. So it's possible it's been even longer than 45 seasons, but it's been at least 45 seasons.
And that includes some pretty bad Jets teams.
Yes.
Yeah.
The Jets allowed 8 consecutive scoring drives against the 49ers. Now, we all know that the Tennessee Titans offense is not in the same league as the San Francisco 49ers offense, even without Christian McCaffrey, who did not play on Monday night. But the Jets defense did not look like the Jets defense on Monday. I have a hard time imagining the same thing is going to happen on Sunday. Not that the Titans are going to be lulled into a false sense of security, but the Jets defense we saw on Monday is not an accurate representation of what the Jets defense has been over the years.
No, it's not. Historically, and when I say historically, I'm talking the last few seasons. With Saleh as the head coach, he's a defensive-minded guy coming from San Francisco. That's one of the reasons why he got the head coaching job, because he did so well as the defensive coordinator with the 49ers. You just don't expect for this defense to have another horrendous week. They were going against one of the best offenses in the National Football League with one of the best head coaches in regards to scheming things up to get his players open. And then they were down a few players. Mosley was out. They didn't have Hassan Reddick. They still don't have him.
Yes, Robert Saleh.
Exactly.
Total saga.
Robert Saleh said today, nothing has changed on the Hassan Reddick front. So it appears that Reddick will not be in the game plan for the Jets on Sunday.
Yeah, so they have to the Titans in this matchup. They have to find a way to get their receivers open quickly. One, because the offensive line isn't where it needs to be. I'm not saying it's not going to get there, but it isn't where it needs to be now. I looked at PFF yesterday, and listen, some people love PFF and swear by it. Some people just look at it and say, okay, it's just a part of a bigger story. And I get it. I understand it. But PFF graded that offensive line bad. They were not good. They were good at times in run blocking, but when you're talking pass blocking, all 5 of them didn't grade out too good. So they got to find a way to, in the way that you help an offensive line like that, run the football first, and then do quick things to get the ball out of your quarterback's hands. Because this is one of the things that I felt was going to happen with this offense. Because it's a new offense, everyone was going to be out of sync. More importantly, the offensive line was going to be out of sync more than anybody. And when the offensive line is not in sync, your team or your offense can't flow the way it needs to. So they got to figure out a way to get the ball out of the quarterback's hands very quickly, because you look at this Jets defense and you don't expect them to play another bad game where they're giving up chunk plays and they can't stop a nosebleed. If you gave them the material or whatnot to stop it. So Brian, and this is why I put it all on Brian Callahan now, because I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, I think you know who you have as a quarterback. I really do think you know what you have as a quarterback. Now it's time to sort of, how do we run our offense that can put the quarterback, which I know who he is for the most part now, how do I put him in a position where we are going to succeed? And when we succeed as a team, then the quarterback succeeds.
I saw a quote, just reading on the timeline, some of the things, and we're going to play some of this. This is our new strategy. And by the way, I would love to hear from listeners, because we go back and forth ourselves on how to present the Callahan press conference on Wednesday during our showtime. Is when a lot of the press conferences happen. And I'm curious, as a listener, if you have an opinion, just give us your feedback. 615-737-1025 on our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Do you like hearing the whole press conference, or do you like when we highlight the points and play you different sound bites? We've done it both ways on the show. Today, we decided to have Jonathan Hutton on live, have a discussion, and then sift through some of the stuff. But a Callahan quote that got me was that he said, September is about kind of finding out about your team. And sometimes it takes 3 or 4 games, the whole month, he was sort of saying, before you really get your identity. And he was talking about in general, regardless of the team, but especially a brand new team with so many new players, a young quarterback, a new coach, 2 new coordinators. That struck me as something. I don't even know what the question was, but it rung a bell when you were talking about that, because they learned some things about Levis that maybe they didn't know, or they had a feeling about one thing, and then after that first game, like, whoop, now we might have to rethink some things.
Before you go on, Derek, Nick tells us we have that clip from the news conference, so let's play the clip that Willy is referring to.
One around the league, offense was down kind of across the board. I heard Kirk Herbstreit talking yesterday about how he thinks that September football is kind of being treated like August football used to, less and less guys playing in the preseason. Does that ring true to you? And if so, do you think it would behoove teams to be a little bit more ready for week 1?
Hard to say. I know I felt like we needed to play. I mean, our starters played a handful in this preseason. I felt like that was necessary. I think it paid off for us early, in the game, and we came out and played well to start, which was good. Hard to say across the league if that's a unanimous thing that you can make a statement about or not. I do think every year, though, the month of September is always revealing about what your football team is, and and it's usually not 1 or 2 games. It's usually 3 or 4. That first part of the season, you're finding out what your team is made of and what they're all about and what they do well and don't do well. And there's really no other way to find that out other than playing NFL football games. And even in the preseason, it's not real because you're not always going, starters on starters for multiple drives. So it's every year is a learning process. Even if you have a lot of returning players, it's still a learning process about what that year's team is going to look like and be like. And it's one that we pay a lot of attention to, particularly in the early part of the season, on how we use players, what they do well, and what our team's identity forms as. And you hope that it's the right way.
That was Brian Callahan, Willy. That was the quote that you were referring to.
Exactly. So I do think this goes hand in hand with what we talked about yesterday, that there is no bigger freak out day in sports than the day after the first game. And so there are a lot of teams that will look one way in the first week and be a totally different story later in the season. And so that's what you have to hope for, is picking up the pieces, evaluating what you saw, and getting better. And what a huge test it is for Levis and for Callahan to take steps forward against the team that still, the Jets are coming in with a lot of question marks. Like, what the heck happened? Like, I don't think they thought they were going to go out to San Francisco and get throttled the way they did. That was a no contest.
I stumbled across an interesting statistic from Jeremy Fowler, and I would love Derek's opinion on this as it relates to offense around the league. 17 of 32 starting quarterbacks in week 1 threw for fewer than 200 yards.
Wow.
Man, that's
so we're picking on Will Levis because we're here. He had the terrible interception, but he is not alone.
And everybody says, I don't care what happens in the rest of the league. I only care about what happens here.
More than half the league, 17 of 32 starting quarterbacks threw for fewer than 200 yards in the week.
I do think that means something.
Yeah, but listen, the defense is more than likely always going to be ahead of the offense, especially early on. And then it sort of shakes itself out as offenses start to get into a rhythm. I would love to see, a study done on a 10-year period of the teams that play majority of the guys in the preseason compared to the teams that don't. How do they start off at the beginning of the season? That would be a good sort of, thing to do in regards to trying to really figure out why offenses tend to struggle early on in the season rather than not. But I look at it again, if indeed this is the case, and this is what you're realizing, Brian Callahan, then what you need to do is run the football. That's how you stake or stamp your identity. You want to be a physical team, so you run the damn football. Now, listen, they threw the ball 32 times, ran it 26 times, so we can call that a balanced attack. But moving forward, you understand what your quarterback, you understand some of the things your quarterback can do and can't do. You understand you're still trying to figure your team out in the first month. If that is indeed the case, run the football to a point where it gets nauseating. And I mean this seriously, because then you start to develop an attitude. You start to develop a sort of a sense of, okay, domination. Then other teams that are coming in here, or you go to their stadium, they know what you're about. Not to say you can't throw the football. I believe that because you brought Callahan in, because of where he's come from, the tree he's come from, you automatically think, oh, he has to pass the football. He has to pass. No, he doesn't. If you're still trying to figure your team out, run the football, establish an identity that way, and then you work from there. You don't try to throw the football to establish an attitude and an identity. You run the football. Physicality, that is what this organization, whether it be the Houston Oilers or the Tennessee Titans, this is what they were built on. Smash mouth, aggressive type of football, staking your claim with that offensive line, and then working around that. We're getting so removed from that we feel they gotta pass the ball. You gotta have this sort of guru offensive coordinator, which you do,
and that's
but you
the
gotta
dilemma.
know
That's the tough
when
one.
to run the football.
Because they have had that the last couple of years, and they can't vote. They've been under 18 in points per game. And I think there's a lot of, well, let's do something different. Let's break from the mold.
But I'm not sure they have the quarterback to do it. I'm not saying he can't.
That might be what they found out.
I'm not sure they do.
And also around the league, I saw the Chargers. I saw the Lions. Absolutely the 49ers. Basically going into the game saying, we are going to pound this ball.
Exactly. And those are teams that can throw the football.
Yes. And it worked a lot. Now, can the Titans do that? Are they physically capable? I do think they're better run blockers than pass blockers right now. Now, something was mentioned. I think Mark Sanchez said this on the broadcast. He said Dylan Radins is their best run blocker. I was like, wait a minute. Dylan Radins is the best something.
He did a really good job.
He did.
Got a lot of love on the
and when he went out, it did. That's kind of when things started to go south, coincidentally or not. But I do think that I'm curious, can they run the ball anything close to what the 49ers sort of did?
615-737-1025. We'll continue this conversation on the other side, as well as get to your phones and texts. 615-737-1025. Join Jared Stillman, Chris Sanders, and our friend Derek Mason at John Bon Jovi's this Sunday from 9:30 to 11:30 for the pregame show. They'll break down the Titans Week 2 matchup against the Jets and give you the latest updates before the game. The pregame show is presented by Parman Tractor and Equipment, Sundeck Nashville, and award-winning Blue Note Juke Joint and Blue Note Crossroads Bourbon.
On Sunday, Will talked about how it felt like it was the first career game of his where he feels like he gave the game away. When you're going into the next week with somebody like that at the quarterback position, psychologically, how do you handle trying to correct things and not get them to clam up or play differently than they would otherwise want to?
Yeah, it's a learning process for guys because that's heavy. Those things weigh heavy on you. It's a learning process for me too. It weighs heavy on me too. So, but those things you work through and you get ready. And then look, sun comes up the next day. You got another team you got to go play. You got to get ready to go. And so that usually fixes most of those problems. But I will say that there's guys that handle it well, and then there's guys where they struggle. And I'd say so far Will has handled it great. Even after the game, he was in a really, really good place, understood the mistakes, understood what he had to correct, and is ready to kind of move forward. And I think you got to be mentally tough in this league to play football, and then even tougher to be a quarterback in the league, because it's always going to be on you, whether you're deserving of it or not. It's always on you, whether you win or lose. And that's a pretty heavy crown to bear sometimes, but Will is about as tough as they come, and he's more than up to the challenge to be able to handle that type of thing. And that part to me was really encouraging when he came in on Monday and was open, honest, critical of his performance, and ready to get ready for the next game.
That was Brian Callahan discussing Will Levis's mindset at his news conference that just wrapped up at St. Thomas Sports Park. Willy and DMase with Adam Vingan here with you on 102.5, 106.3 The Game. I'm interested in the mental toughness aspect of this, Derek, because that is something that gets talked about ad nauseum in sports. And I'm not discounting the importance of having mental toughness. But how much does that play into being able to actually go out on the field and execute? And the fact that Will Levis is apparently in good spirits after what happened on Sunday, that's good. You don't want Will Levis to be down on himself. But how much of that mental toughness is going to get him to execute the Titans' plan the way that Brian Callahan wants?
Well, you hope it does. You hope he's able to put the things behind him, correct them, recognize them for what they are, but then being able to say, you know what, I got another game. I got to move forward. I've learned from those things. So that's where that, the mental fortitude or the mental toughness comes in, because there's going to be peaks and valleys in this game, whether you are the greatest quarterback, Patrick Mahomes, or you are Bryce Young. You got to have ups and downs. How do you then get up after you have one of those downs? And then how do you go in and orchestrate the offense the way it needs to be orchestrated, making sure everyone is still on the same page? Listen, you can have mental toughness, but if you don't have the ability to, look at things for what they are, correct them, and moving forward, it means nothing. Mental toughness and you being able to do your job they're not, you can have one and not have the other. It's not like they both come as a package. They don't. You can have one and not have the other, at least in this regard.
Caleb on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, asks, he may have missed it, but have they said anything about DeAndre Hopkins being a full go this week? According to Paul Kaharski, who was at the news conference, Brian Callahan said DeAndre Hopkins is likely to be closer to a full load this week. Jamal Adams will also practice.
Hey,
that's not nothing. Jamal Adams being able to participate because he missed his first game with his new team because of injury after he waited for a long time for a contract because he couldn't stay healthy.
I'm sure he would love to play against the Jets. That would be very nice for Jamal Adams, even if it could just be spot duty and just be a role player. I have my bar set low for him. He's making the league minimum basically for a veteran. So temper your expectations, but I would like to see what they do with him. I think he's a guy that could make a play here or there on a defense that has some things to bring to the table.
But if you have DeAndre Hopkins at full go, because he was active against the Bears, but
in retrospect, I wonder if that was the right move.
Yes.
But I would hope that he gets better and getting the reps with the offense. That might be the biggest thing, right? Because he just wasn't there for most of the training camp. He got hurt very early in the training camp.
The Titans passing game, and I've thought about this as I was watching it. I don't think it would have made a big difference if Hop was there. I really don't, because it was more than just the receivers getting open or not getting open. I think there were opportunities where you had a chance to hit receivers, you didn't hit receivers, or you just didn't have enough time to hit them. So I don't think whether they had D-Hop in the game or not fully go would have changed a lot in regards to how the game ended up being. But what I've noticed is this: they need to get quicker at the receiver position. They have there's not much, let's say that. There's not much quickness at the position with the guys that are your lead dogs. Ridley is fast, but he's more fast than quick. Tyler Boyd is a good receiver. He operates in a space that's best for him. Hop is a veteran guy. There's no quickness to him. There's no speed to him. He's just a damn good catcher of the football, and he finds ways to sort of manipulate the coverage or manipulate his body and to find space in the zone or man coverage. But they have no true quickness that they play. Traylon Burks the same way. He's a big, fast guy, but he's not as quick. They need to add some quickness to that receiver room. And I'm not saying they don't have it, because they do. Jackson is the quickest guy they have on that offense in regards to the receivers. Find a way, whether it's 5 plays, 8 plays, a package, to get him in a game. If you watch these offenses around the league, they're playing their young players. They are. If you have talent, if you're quick, fast, they're playing their young players. Look at every team around, just about every team around the league. Even if they got veteran guys, they're playing their guys that they know can cause a matchup problem. Jackson causes a matchup problem. Why? Because of his quickness and his ability to get in and out of his breaks a lot faster than the 3 guys they have in front of him.
And it's too crowded for him to get in there.
Exactly.
Right now.
But they got to find a way. I promise you, if you find a way to get this kid the ball, they put him in the game last game. But if you find a way to get him the ball. Did
he look a little slow to you on the returns? I thought I didn't look as dynamic.
No, the returns are something different. Here's the problem with the returns. There's no way in hell when you're doubling a gunner that they should get down there and tackle your guy. That happened more times than not. And that's something that Anderson needs to address right now. When we set a double team on the edges, why are we doing that? So he can affect our punt returner catching the ball and getting up the field. But that wasn't the case this last game. The guy, whoever was out there, and the 2 guys that were trying to hold him up, he split both of them and end up making tackles. So first and foremost, on a punt return, that cannot happen. You got to give your returner at least an opportunity to get some steam ahead and get up the field quickly. That didn't happen for the Tennessee Titans last game. I hope it was a point of emphasis, or I hope it is a point of emphasis during practice this week. If you're going to hold up the gunners with 2 guys, hold them up. Don't let that one gunner split you and end up making a tackle. So I think that's what his problem was. He never had an opportunity truly to get ahead of steam and get going. But on the offensive end, you can manipulate that. You can put him in a 3 wide receiver package, a bunch package or whatnot. Get him some space, allow him to get the ball in his hands, and then go. Use his quickness and speed to his advantage. They haven't done that. And I understand a bit of it. Why? Because he's young and he may not know the offense the way he needs to. But give that man 10 to 15 plays and say, learn these plays, because we might run at least a handful of them in the game, and we're counting on you.
Willie, you asked what the winning percentage of a team is when they give up a block punt for a touchdown. Now, I wasn't able to find that specifically on Football Reference, but I did look up what the Titans' all-time record is. This includes Oilers. What the Oilers/Titans all-time record is in the regular season when allowing a pick 6. They are 20, 72, and 1.
Wow.
When allowing a pick 6 in a game in franchise history.
I'll tie this into if you happen to be a hockey fan, and if you don't, I think every sport's got this, right? You will always hear a coach say something like this. In hockey, it would be, if you have a 5-on-3 and don't score, your team usually loses the game. And I think I've heard many football coaches say, if you give up a sudden touchdown, a return touchdown, a block punt touchdown, an interception return for a touchdown, which of course the Titans gave up 2 of those. It's like that would be a really interesting stat. If you have 2 touchdowns like that, your winning percentage over the years would have to be less than 10%, probably over the years, I would guess. But a coach doesn't even have to look at the stats, right? He just will always say it because you cannot win in the league in a game where you give up a punt block touchdown and a pick 6 touchdown. You just don't win. I don't care how good your team is. And that is what is almost encouraging about some of the other things that they did, particularly on defense. Like, okay, they didn't lose by that much, and they gave away so much in that game.
Yes, I have to imagine the winning percentage in that situation is minuscule. But 20, 72, and 1 all time, the Titans/Oilers when giving up a pick 6.
A pick 6.
Yes. 615-737-1025. Our phone and text lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Coming up next, Mitch Light of The Athletic will join us for his weekly chat about all things college football. We'll chat with Mitch next. 615-737-1025. Willy Donick, Derek Mason with Adam Vingan, 1025-1063. The Game. Willy and DMase, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Willy Donick, Derek Mason with Adam Vingan, and joining us on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, Mitch Light from The Athletic to discuss all things college football. Mitch, how are you today?
I'm good, Adam. Just want to start us off by asking you not to put words in my mouth from last week. I stand by everything I say. I don't need you changing the words. So just
okay,
we just have that disclaimer every week.
Okay, well, we had the tape. You were mostly right.
Mostly right, yes.
You were mostly right. So let's start with the biggest upset, not just of the college football season, but in recent memory. Northern Illinois beating Notre Dame in South Bend. If I'm not mistaken, Northern Illinois received $1.4 million to play in that game. And I don't know if you're a fan of The Wire, Mitch, but to quote the great state senator Clay Davis, I'm going to have to clean it up a little bit. I'll take someone's money if they're giving it away. And Northern Illinois takes the money, takes the win. Did that loss from the Fighting Irish tank their chances of qualifying for the college football playoff?
First of all, I'm a huge fan of The Wire. It is very early to say that. A lot depends on obviously what happens with Notre Dame. Like if you watch that game, you say, okay, we can talk about Notre Dame running the table, but did that team look good enough to run the table? No, it didn't. But okay, let's say they run the table. How does Texas A&M do? How's USC do? Right now, they look really good. That game to end the season looks very good, while the Florida State game doesn't look as good. So obviously, nothing happens in a vacuum. But sure, they can still make the college football playoff. How does Northern Illinois do? We've seen this a lot. Like I think Marshall won at Notre Dame a couple of years ago and ended up being 6-6. There's nothing special. To me, the bigger picture is just Notre Dame, another inexplicable loss under this coaching staff, under Marcus Freeman, with so much at stake after that big win at Texas A&M. And just to look, like I always say, if you take the names off the jersey, who's the better team? Like nothing fluky about that game. Northern Illinois pushed them at the line of scrimmage and deserved to win that game. And that, to me, that's the bigger picture. Is just we were all jumping on the Notre Dame bandwagon, and they have their offensive limitations. They did not throw the ball very well, inconsistent. That interception was just absolutely brutal. So would I pick Notre Dame to make the playoff now? No, I would not, but they surely can still make it.
You touched on this a little bit, but which team stands to benefit the most currently from the fact that Notre Dame, in terms of playoff seeding, that Notre Dame lost last weekend?
Yeah, I think it's basically any at-large team, because that just removes a spot. They're not taking a conference championship spot. So if we were all assuming that Notre Dame was going to make it, it just kind of frees up another spot. So is it a team like USC? Is it a team like Missouri? Penn State? There's so many. It's still so early, but it's sort of like in college basketball when your team's in the bubble. You want those other teams that you're fighting for a spot to lose. And we're all trying to train ourselves to think this way in college football now. We're not used to it. But these early season upsets, while they're fun, like you mentioned, Adam, they benefit as many 10 to 12 to 15 teams, because that's a damaging loss. It's not like they lost to Texas A&M. They lost to Northern Illinois, and we can say great things about Northern Illinois, but that loss is going to sting.
We'll talk with Mitch Light of The Athletic. Now, Mitch, the Vols. And listen, I know their first two opponents wasn't ideal in regards to a true test. Now, North Carolina State, they were ranked, but if you watch them play, I mean, Tennessee dominated them from start to finish. The question I want to ask about this Vol team is, are they for real? And I understand, the opponents the first two games, but they have held their opponents to less than 13 points, or I think it's right at 13 points. Their offense has been dominant. Their defense, again, looks like one of the best defenses and will remain one of the best defenses in all of college football. The quarterback is playing well. Receivers are as well, too. Is this team just a byproduct of who they played, or do you think this is a really good Vols team?
Yeah, it's clearly really good. And, the funny thing is, and we probably just sound redundant, but like NC State, they were ranked. We thought they were going to be good. if you didn't know they were ranked, you'd say that's not a good team. You know, they almost lost to Western Carolina, who actually lost last week to Campbell, and then they couldn't move the ball against Tennessee. But we all know Tennessee is for real. That if we're going into this season, I mean, I thought we all thought the defensive line would be good. We thought they'd been improved defensively, but what they've done has been amazing. My favorite stat, I was just looking at the box score before I came on. NC State only had 3 drives over 10 yards the entire game. They had a 29-yard drive, a 40-yard drive, and a 59-yard drive. They had 9 drives that are 10 yards or less. And that's not a stat we look at much. I like looking at it because, you know, tells you how teams controlled. I like looking at yards per play, not total yards, yards per play and drives. How consistently did you move the ball? And NC State could get nothing going. If you limit teams to that kind of drives and just don't let them move the ball, if you don't turn the ball over, you're going to win a lot of games. And Tennessee's putting itself where they don't need to be perfect on offense to win games. So they're so far so good. They can only play who they've played, and they have looked as dominant as a team in the country.
Now, another team within the SEC that I watched last weekend and it felt good about it at one point, but then it's like, what is going on? Arkansas and Pittman, the head coach. Now, they got Bobby Petrino as their offensive coordinator. This team with the quarterback Green, they look great at times, but then they always manage to do something that put them in a position to lose the game. What do you think of this Arkansas team? Because they got good players. They got a hell of an offensive coordinator. They did play well on defense at portions of the game, but yet and still they gave up the lead and basically gave the game back to Oklahoma State.
This game might be Sam Pittman's undoing. When you're on the hot seat and you go on the road and you roll up 648 yards of offense against a good but not a great team, you average 7 yards per play, you control the game, you have to win that game. And they did so many things not to win that game. They doubled them up from a yardage standpoint. They just played like a team that did not know how to win, just some critical mistakes. Big picture, stepping back, if you can get over the sting of the loss, this is a good-looking offensive team. Taylor Green's a fun player. We have seen a lot of players, quarterbacks, jump up from a G5 team to Power 5 teams and struggle. Grayson McCall has been one of them. There are several around the country, so you never know how they're going to make that transition. Taylor Green has been very good, and Bobby Petrino is outstanding. You can say what you want about him. Remember Bob Shoop, the former defensive coordinator at Vanderbilt and Tennessee, Penn State. I remember talking to him once when Vanderbilt was playing Arkansas. He said, not necessarily from a scheme standpoint, but from an actual play caller, Bobby Petrino was maybe the best he's ever gone up against, knowing just how to keep a defense off balance, knowing what plays to call success in. So I think we're going to keep seeing this from the offense. And if you can move the ball like that, you're going to have a chance. But they just the self-inflicted wounds just killed them.
Mitch Light is with us from The Athletic. We're talking college football. Mitch, scary to reveal, but we do this from time to time. You and I have been watching Vanderbilt football as far back as the late 1980s.
Let's just say 89. We're not that old.
89. So late 80s. 89 sounds better than late 80s.
I was born in 1989. So there you go.
We were knocking on the door to 1990. Okay.
All that to say,
I also knocked on the door to 1990.
All that to say, we have watched some Vanderbilt teams struggle in the type of game they played on Saturday, where everybody knows that they are supposed to win and supposed to win easily, and it's not so easy. And you come out of the game going, "Eesh!" They didn't just line up and overpower a team that you should do so against. And we can have countless examples in different decades, but I think that was the thing I felt best about on Saturday is they came out of the gate, they were sharp, they took it right at the opponent, and they looked like they were way, way better than Alcorn State. So it's just another notch on the belt of, okay, they look significantly improved from where they've been.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard Clark Lee say this, and he might have said this, I know it's on your show, but I think in 3 previous games, Vanderbilt's played probably one half of good football against an FCS opponent. Obviously, the ETSU debacle to start the season did not play well against Alabama A&M last year. I know the score got out of control late, just some turnovers. Played well against Elon in the first half, I think, in his second year, but then had to hold on for dear life. So I'm totally with you. Like, The concerning thing in this game is you go in and that they couldn't control the line of scrimmage and they were averaging 2.8 yards per carry, but that wasn't the case. Like you said, they were very methodical, ran the ball, did not show a lot, did not throw the ball a ton. When they did, it was efficient and effective, and then they broke the game open with big plays, which you would expect. So yeah, does it prove that this team's going to win 6-7 games? No, but it proves that they've taken a step forward, maybe with the maturity and just kind of taking care of business on the heels of the big Virginia Tech game, when everyone's kind of patting them on the back saying, great job. So yes, I totally agree with everything you said there.
You know, another game that was on while Vanderbilt and Tennessee were playing, I was trying to watch as many games as I could. That was one of those frenzied nights. But one of the games in the mix was Nebraska really having their way with Colorado. And I'm trying to assess how much better is Nebraska, because I think Colorado is in the spotlight. We're going to watch Colorado a lot. I think we know what the issues are there. They've got great talent at the very top of their roster, but Nebraska impressed me a lot. How much better are they?
A lot. Matt Rule is a very good coach. Look it up. His year ones haven't been great. His year twos at Temple and Baylor, his teams have taken a big jump. And Dylan Raiola, he drops a 5-star true freshman quarterback into the mix. They were horrible. I wouldn't say horrible at quarterback last year. They weren't good. Jeff Sims was terrible. And then they went with the Heiberg, I think his name was, the running quarterback, who they didn't have much of a downfield threat. They added some wide receivers in the portal. They got much better there. It's just the progression of a program builder on one side and the complete opposite on the other side. Colorado to me looks like a very similar team as they were last year. Like you mentioned, Willie, high-end talent. They're probably better defensively, but the offensive line, while they might have quote unquote more talent, it's still week 2 of a rebuild on the offensive line. And I'm really interested right now. How will they hold that locker room together? You're starting to see some cracks, some things Shedeur said post-game about the offensive line. Last year, they seemed to be a pretty cohesive group, and, we're not there, but didn't seem to be a lot of infighting. If they lose to Colorado State this week on the road, and Colorado State's not very good, I'm going to pay attention to how those guys react to it. So big picture, I think Nebraska's quite a bit better this year.
Mitch, another game that was going on at that same time on Saturday was Alabama. And if you only saw the final score, you would say, okay, Alabama, they got it done. They had some great shots of the Alabama fans when it got very, very hairy. Like there was a time where, are we going to lose this game to South Florida?
That showed Nick Saban. It seemed like he was anxious.
But the students there were a lot of F words, if you could read lips, just astonished looks. Like they were really in trouble for a while. What's going on there? Is this just a blip in the road? Because DeBoer, I think, has a great track record going in, but we know he's still sort of an outsider coming in that first year, trying to establish confidence in the fan base and things. I wonder about all those things.
Yeah, there's no doubt. Don't look at the final score in that game. It's South Florida team that had played Alabama very well. That was kind of a low point, maybe the Nick Saban era, week 2 or week 3 last year when they really struggled. South Florida was a good offensive team, but I didn't think they were amazing offensively. No. Obviously, South Florida wasn't they missed some receivers, so that was part of it. The thing, and I'd have to go back and look at the box score closely, is Western Kentucky game got out of hand quickly. A lot of big plays for Alabama, which is fine. Obviously, would you want to score an 80-yard play? Of course you would. But I don't think they're sustaining drives as much as maybe Kalen DeBoer would like. Again, scoring quickly, and they scored very quickly toward the end of this game. So they have a very interesting barometer test this week going to Wisconsin. Very cool non-conference game that we're not used to seeing from Alabama. I think Alabama's like a 2-touchdown favorite or more. Wisconsin has not looked good so far this year. So I think it's a really good, again, barometer test for them. If they win and struggle again offensively, then we can look around and say, okay, maybe this transition isn't going as smooth as we thought. I don't think there's anything going on there. I think DeBoer's a really good coach. I think he's got a great demeanor. It's not like, oh, he's in over his head or anything like that. I can't really pinpoint the issues offensively, but I'm not going to sit here and say that this guy, doesn't know what he's doing.
Now, October 19th is going to be a day I think everyone's going to be watching, because you're going to have what we assume at the time will be the number one team ranked, Georgia, going against Texas. Now, Texas they're going to have to play Oklahoma right before they play Georgia. But from what you've seen in the last 2 weeks, Texas went up to Michigan, and that's when you got to make that long travel from the South up north. That's going to be a battle in itself, but they completely dominated Michigan. Obviously, first game of the year, Clemson got dominated by Georgia. But if these two teams had to play right now, who are you picking, Georgia or Texas, and for what reason?
Yeah, that game's in Texas. I would probably pick Texas just because it's in Texas. I think Georgia's probably a little more complete team. I'd like to see what happens at Texas with the running back position. They're obviously very banged up there. They got by last week, and they looked awesome last week. Quinn Ewers was really, really good. And, Michigan obviously has its issues offensively, but they were still really good defensively. Does Georgia feel better about itself? Not that Georgia needs to feel good about itself, but the fact that Clemson just doesn't look awful. They go on, they put it with like 40-something points on App State in the first half there. Maybe just Georgia's that good. But you're right. It's great that these two teams are playing each other, because there's a lot of SEC teams that don't play each other, because we've got 16 teams in this league now. So, right now I might pick Texas just because they're at home, but I probably think Georgia's a better, more complete team.
Mitch Light of The Athletic joining us as he does every Wednesday to break down college football. Mitch, thanks so much for joining us. We'll talk next week.
Sounds good, guys. Take care.
Mitch Light from The Athletic joining us. 615-7 against the Chicago Bears on Sunday, but another Titans first round pick had, I would say, an equally ugly performance. We'll break that down next. Nashville's best deal this week is 312 Pizza Company in Germantown. 312 Pizza Company serves the best pizza in town, as well as Chicago-style eats like Chicago dogs, Italian beef sandwiches, and more. Check them out at 371 Monroe Street in Germantown, or order takeout online at 312pizzaco.com. Head to theGameNashville.com/deals now to get half off a $30 gift card to 312 Pizza Company while supplies last.
Okay, let's talk Loan Pronto. It's time to check the rates, because the mortgage rates have gone down, and there are a number of ways that you can put yourself in a better position because of it if you're a homeowner. So pay attention. My friends at Loan Pronto have rates that start with a 4 here recently, so call now and get in on it before the rates go back up. So ask about their zero-cost rate reduction home loan. You can lock in a lower rate with no closing costs in a matter of days, with almost no paperwork and usually no appraisal. And if you act now, you can even skip your next 2 house payments. Call now, because Loan Pronto can give you that rate quote in minutes with no hard credit pull, no upfront fees like some of the other guys. Here's the phone number, 615-499-5780, or go to loanpronto.com. That's 615-499-5780 or loanpronto.com. Equal housing lender, NMLS 166-1781 on approved credit, NMLS consumeraccess.org.
the patience with that, though, with pass pro in a rookie like J.C. Latham, where that's going to be something that's going to take a little bit longer to adjust to? And how confident do you feel having Bill here to kind of help maybe that process speed up a little bit more?
Yeah, I think that every young offensive lineman, I think, struggles because there's no simulating what it feels like on game day. Even in practice, it's not the same. And you face different styles of rushers. And so when you're in training camp, you practice against the same couple of guys and you get to know their moves and their counters and you get better at playing them. But when you start to see a different rusher and different techniques and rush plans every week, it changes. And that's, I think, what separates the guys that are pros versus the guys that don't know quite yet on how that process works every week to get ready to play. Certainly don't have anybody better, I think, in there helping them get ready than my dad. But there's a patience factor and there's a growth factor that's involved. And it's on us to improve them, and it's on the player to continue to make sure they're doing everything they can do to make that growth stay on a steady rise. Because there's a lot of work to do every single day we walk in here.
That was Brian Callahan earlier today discussing J.C. Latham and young offensive linemen in general making the adjustment to the National Football League. Willy Donick, Derek Mason with Adam Vingan on 102.5, 106.3 The Game. That makes sense for J.C. Latham. He's a rookie. That was his first game in the NFL, his first official game in the NFL. But I mentioned there was a performance in the game against the Bears that was overshadowed by what Will Levis did in terms of its, for lack of a better term, stinkiness.
Yeah. And I think it should not, it was also overlooked. And I'm glad that question was asked about Latham specifically, because he did miss his man. And it was Darrell Taylor the first time, a quicker, smaller edge rusher who did some things. He lined up on both sides of the field at different times and went after the two Titans tackles with a lot of success. And then it was more of the inside end that beat him. But on the two critical plays, Latham did not protect his man very well. And it was easier to see that. But what you're about to reveal is what is not as easy to see. My eye test says it wasn't this bad, but read him and weep, the numbers you have on Skoronski here.
Yeah, so I'm referring to Peter Skoronski, and I saw this via Next Gen Stats, and it was eye-popping what I read. And this is where the blend of the analytics and the eye test always sort of butt heads, right? Because sometimes they mesh and sometimes they don't. But just listen to how poorly, according to Next Gen Stats, Peter Skoronski played, and then I'm going to bring it to the game on Sunday. In his week 1 matchup against the Bears, Titans left guard Peter Skoronski gave up 8 quarterback pressures during his 38 pass blocking snaps, tied for the most of any offensive lineman league-wide. His 5 quick pressures allowed were also the most in the league, 2.28 seconds on average to pressure. So 8 pressures overall, tied for the most of any offensive lineman in the league. 5 quick pressures allowed, also the most in the league, 2.28 seconds on average to pressure. And this is where I bring it to Sunday. Since the start of last season, Quinnen Williams, who will be on the other side of the field for the Jets,
pretty darn good player.
Quinnen Williams leads all defensive tackles and quarterback pressures with 73 and ranks tied for second in quick pressures with 29. Williams is expected to face Skoronski on the majority of his snaps. Williams lined up at right defensive tackle on 64% and nose tackle on 23% of his snaps in week 1 against the 49ers. So we're talking about what Will Levis can do and the Titans can do to improve on their performance against the Bears and prevent that from happening again. Peter Skoronski, based on the numbers alone, as you said, Will, you have to balance the eye test with the analytics, but based on the numbers alone, Peter Skoronski had an awful game against the Bears
as a pass blocker, right? As
a pass blocker specifically.
I thought yes. The run blocking by the entire line was pretty good. They ran the ball well. They had over 5 yards per carry. So let's give them that. But the pass protection,
yes,
DMase, as you pointed out, it is still a work in progress.
Yeah, pass protection was horrid for Peter Skoronski. Again, if you believe in PFF, whatnot, then PFF states in pass blocking he had the lowest grade on the team. Now run blocking he did a little bit better. A lot better. He was right at 69.1, almost 70%. So he passed in a sense. from a run blocking standpoint. And I think all the guys did somewhat of a good job. Dylan Ratings was better in his pass blocking sets than he was in his run blocking. Both of them were in the 60s. Pass blocking was high 60. Run blocking was low 60. But overall, he was right at if you want to give him a grade, he was right at a D+, C-, somewhere around there. They have to get better. This offensive line can't afford to be C- and D+. They have to get to a point where they are consistent in what they're doing. I'm going to give them a slight pass because it was the first game of the season and they're figuring things out still. Because again, the offensive line, if I know one thing, I know it takes a minute for an offensive line to gel. It just doesn't happen in a preseason. It just doesn't happen in 2-a-day practices. It takes games after games after games for these guys to get familiar with one another and how the blocking scheme is supposed to be blocked the way Bill Callahan wants it to.
I would say this. Did you, as I was watching the game, now it unraveled down the stretch, but while they were in the lead and for the majority of the game, I was saying to myself, it's not great. I'm talking about specifically the pass protection. The run blocking was good. I wish they could have maybe gotten more critical runs at crunch time to sort of, chew up clock and, with the lead. That would have been the home run. But again, we're looking for small gains here, right? I did think it was better than a lot of the games I saw last year, where I'm just saying, look, they can't call half the plays in their playbook because you just can't block this play. Yeah. I felt like they were struggling, but they were battling and they were still running the plays that they wanted to run. I did think, even though the grades look awful, my eye test said, okay, I've got something to work with here.
Well, here is the problem with, sort of what you said, Willie, and what I said and what Adam said. The problem is they were so low to the ground. They were like underneath the dirt last 2 years. It was even the bad looks better than what it did last year.
Right.
That's the whole problem, because you're right. Yeah, they wasn't great, but it didn't look like it did last year. But it still was bad. And from a pass blocking standpoint, now some guys were a little bit better than others, but I think as a whole, because the bar was so low, hell, the bar again was under the dirt, that the play that they showed this past weekend, it wasn't great. It was bad, but it looked better than what it had looked in previous seasons. They got to get to a point where we are not looking back at last season or the season before. They got to get to a point where they're playing consistent football. Things are not always going to be ideal. They're going to give up sacks. They're going to give up pressures, but you have to do it in a way that it looks as if you're improving along the way. These guys, it's going to take them a minute to gel, but it can't look like bad. It needs to look every week like they're improving as an offensive line, because if they're not, we're going to see the same things that we saw last year from this offense, meaning they ain't going to be able to vote.
Now, I don't recall
under 18 points per game.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
I don't recall, and please jump in if you do. I'm sure you guys do. I don't recall a specific one of those pressures allowed by Skoronski that was so egregious. But we're talking about improvement along the offensive line. When we talk about Skoronski specifically last season, he had poor players around him on that offensive line. He had an appendectomy, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, that was after the first game, and that hurt him.
So there were some built-in excuses for Peter Skoronski not playing up to his potential last season. But to see those numbers, and I rely on numbers pretty heavily, especially when it comes to football, because I am not an X's and O's football expert. But 8 quarterback pressures on 38 pass blocking snaps, 5 quick pressures, apparently 2.28 seconds on average to pressure. So just like that, who's ever lining up against Peter Skoronski was able to get toward Will Levis, especially playing Quinnen Williams in the New York Jets this week. I mean, that's a matchup that I'm sure Jets defensive coaches are salivating over right now. And that's something I'm going to be really watching closely. But as much as we talk about Will Levis, I mean, left guard quarterback, apples to oranges. But the Predators, the Titans had, used a premium pick, the number 11th overall pick on a guard.
Yeah.
To borrow.
And that's the big picture thing, right? It's not so much, hey, how is your left guard playing? It's what has to happen for this team to become a good team, a team that can contend for some things. You have to have Skoronski and Latham be good players, if not great players, right? They need desperately those guys to not have those kind of numbers. So it is troubling for a first rounder in his second year to grade out that low. And I'm not giving up on him at all, but I have to say, like, I was expecting more. My bar is higher for those two guys. And it's like you said, Derek, I hope by the end of the year, we have better feelings about those guys, but it's critical that those guys succeed.
Yeah, they're going to have to. Peter's going to have to get better. If you're just looking at it, I'm not going to put Rumpkitch in this, Andrew Rumpkitch in this category, because he just graded out bad. He was bad. He couldn't pass block to save his life. But Peter Skoronski can't be the lowest graded guy on your offensive line. And I'm taking Andrew Rumpkitch out of it. But you drafted him 11th overall. These numbers, they are not, you can't accept these numbers. And I'm sure they're not going to accept these numbers. He's going to have to get better, because that's the strength of your offensive line. The left side of your offensive line, you got two guys that were drafted in the top 10, and you got a center that's one of the best centers in the National Football League. He graded out well. Cushenberry, he graded out well, at least in pass blocking. Run blocking was a little suspect, but he graded out well in pass blocking. But your left side has to be your dominated side, because you spent the most money on that side relative to your draft. You drafted two guys in the top 15. They need to start playing like top 15 players. And I'm not saying they're not, but the way they played last week, they need to get better this week, because that right side, especially without Dylan Ratens, Nicholas Petit, no. He still hasn't shown that he's learned anything up until now. He's still making the same mistakes he made last year. And I get it, the whole circumstance involving him, being suspended, being hurt, and all this other stuff. But you can't play the way he played and expect to have a line that's going to jail. He needs to get better. That left side needs to get better. The only two guys that I really feel good about is Cushenberry and Ratens, and Ratens may not even play.
I think Ratens is going to be limited in practice. I think that's what Brian Callahan said. I guess we'll see the injury report later. I think the expectation is that he will play on Sunday. But I'm sorry. And that doesn't mean I'm out on Latham or Skoronski. Of course.
It doesn't mean that.
But, kudos to Dylan Ratens. He's been through the ringer. Jared pointed this out the other day. He's been through the ringer. He was sort of discarded by the previous coaching staff, and now apparently he's the best offensive lineman on the team.
And had a torn ACL. He came back. He's come back from a torn ACL, and all of that being cast off as a bust before that injury happened. So I give him credit for staying with the course, keep plugging away and getting better to earn the opportunity that he's getting right now.
Only one quarterback in the NFL in week 1 was pressured on more of his dropbacks than Will Levis, and that was Jacoby Brissett.
It wasn't Bryce Young?
No, it was not.
Goodness.
Will Levis was at 47.4%, and Brissett was above him. It was still under 50%. It was 48 point something. But Jacoby Brissett was the only quarterback in the NFL pressured on a higher percentage of his dropbacks than Will Levis.
And you know what the Jets are going to do? Pressure him.
I mean, Quinnen Williams against Peter Skoronski. If those statistics tell us anything, it might be a field day for Quinnen Williams on Sunday if Peter Skoronski doesn't improve.
We did circle a stat, and that is average time getting the ball out. That Joe Burrow and the Bengals, it was quite a bit quicker on average than Levis and Tannehill last year. So the Callahan offense, I want to see what the game plan looks like if it's different, because I still saw a lot of I don't want to say slow developing plays, but this is what your thing is too. The speed of the offense in general. You hit on it with the first practice. You're like their tempo isn't quick. They don't play quick. And they're going to have to play quicker if these numbers are going to get better, right? Because if they're sitting ducks, if they're going to have a slow developing offense with a quarterback who holds the ball, that doesn't read defenses great, it's a recipe for non-success.
615-737-1025. We'll continue to take your calls and texts. 615-737-1025. Tune into 1025, 1063 The Game this Saturday for Vanderbilt football. The Commodores will take on Georgia State on the road with pregame beginning at 4:30 and kickoff at 6. Coverage is also available on the Game Nashville app and at thegamenashville.com. Tune into 93.3 FM Totally Hits Nashville this Saturday for MTSU football. The Blue Raiders will take on Western Kentucky at Floyd Stadium. Pregame starts at 4:30 and kickoff is at 6. Coverage also available on the 93.3 FM Totally Hits Nashville app and at totallyhitsnashville.com. Willy and DMase with Adam Vingan here. Wrapping up the show. Final segment before Jared comes in at 2 o'clock. So I saw this yesterday, or it was actually 2 days ago. on social media. Brian Baldinger does these great tape breakdowns on his Twitter account at Baldy NFL. And he had some high praise for T'Vondre Sweat. He said, T'Vondre Sweat has a new name after his first NFL game, T-Pain, bringing the pain. Bears couldn't block him. And Willie, you mentioned that Jeffrey Simmons shared that video and had a different message.
Yeah, and he said that he's just getting started. You guys haven't seen anything yet, something like that. If I had to characterize what I think is the best thing that the Titans have going right now, I do think it's that tandem. I think that is the strongest area of their team in the now, but also in the, can this be something that they build around for the next couple of years? And that is Sweat and Simmons side by side. Because the more you watch Sweat, the more you kind of realize that he is a force. You're going from being, I hope what I'm seeing in practice translates to games too. Oh yes, it is translating in games. So it's only one game, but everybody is saying the right things about what he's doing to continue to grow and get better.
His box score stats didn't jump off the page, just like, the normal stuff that you can pull off the box score. But I thought he was noticeable throughout the game. I think one question a lot of people had coming into the season was, is he going to be able to stay on the field? Is he going to play enough snaps to make an impact? He played about 2/3 of the defensive snaps for the Titans on Sunday, which is really good, I think. I mean, it can improve, of course, but he was on the field for 2/3 of the snaps. That was encouraging as well.
Yeah, and the only individuals that played more than him, at least on the D line, was Arden Key, Jeffrey Simmons, obviously, and Harold Landry. So you're talking about 3 guys that were there last year that they depend heavily on. And then the big fella got 38 snaps. I believe that's what it was. So they believe that when he's on the field, he makes a huge difference on how their defense is able to put pressure on individuals or to sort of stop what they're doing. And listen, Sebastian Joseph Day ain't no slouch either.
I like him.
Yeah, he has a high motor and he goes and goes. So they have guys within that defense. Even Keandre Coburn, he had some pressures in that game. So they got guys that have motors that can continue to go. But T'Vondre Sweat, what he's able to do with the help of Jeffrey Simmons only adds to how good this defense as a whole can be. Because when he truly figures this out, meaning T'Vondre Sweat, you're going to see the reason why he was named Outland Trophy winner last season. He's going to be along with Jeffrey, one of the most dominating forces in the middle in the NFL.
And I'm curious how that will go against the New York Jets. Willie made this point with Hutton earlier in terms of going from the least experienced in Caleb Williams making his first career NFL start to playing the oldest active player in the NFL in Aaron Rodgers. You're also going from a highly mobile quarterback to a 40-something coming off an Achilles tear. I mean, Aaron Rodgers is not moving too much outside of the pocket. So,
that's something to watch.
Yeah.
Is because when he was a little more of a spring chicken, was one of the best in the league at knowing how to evade the rush, run when he was supposed to run, but also I'm running, I'm throwing. Like Steve McNair was the best I think I've ever seen at that in his heyday. But I am wondering, can you scout Rodgers and say, okay, we can come at him a certain way, because I don't think he can do what he used to be able to do.
No, he still has trouble. I think he's still thinking about the Achilles injury. He still seems to have trouble moving around in the pocket when people are close to him. And that's something that I'm sure the Jets hope that he can get over sooner rather than later. Just don't get over it this week. You have an opportunity, meaning the Tennessee Titans, to put immense pressure on him up the middle of the field. Again, you have 2 guys that just about every play can get pressure on the quarterback up the middle. And what does quarterbacks love to do, or they hate? Let's say they hate not being able to step up in the pocket and deliver a pass. Well, you can compound it for Aaron Rodgers and the Jets. He's been injured. He's an older individual, and if you don't give him the ability to step up in the pocket, I think you're going to see some of the same things that we saw last week versus the San Francisco 49ers. You're going to get him to deliver passes that he don't want to deliver, or you're going to get him to just only look at one or two guys because you're getting pressure on him, and he can't do the one thing that quarterbacks love to do, and that's step up in the pocket and deliver a pass.
One thing I noticed in doing some research for this game, Rodgers completed a pass to only 3 players against the 49ers. He had 5 to Garrett Wilson, 5 to Breece Hall, and 5 to Alan Lazard, or may have been, yeah, I think that's right. Either way, the fewest receivers he's completed it's the fewest amount of receivers he's completed a pass to in a single game in his career.
His career is quite long.
Yes,
I did.
We'll talk about it a little bit. We'll talk about this a little bit more tomorrow. But the fact that he 3 receivers, the fewest receivers he's completed the pass to in a single game, excluding games he left with injury or was rested. So it doesn't count the game he got hurt in last year, for example. But only 3 players caught balls for the Jets in week 1.
It was noticeable. And the Snead versus Garrett Wilson, shadow him all over the field matchup is going to be one to watch. And another part of it was just how it showed you how few times the Jets had the ball and could get things going. And so a lot of this has to do with the 49ers, but at the same time, you wonder if the Titans can exploit this.
But I think they have the possibility to do it because the Jets offense doesn't seem figured out with an older quarterback who just came back from an Achilles injury. Well, the Titans are dealing with an offensive line that hadn't been together, a quarterback that was in and out of the lineup because he was hurt, didn't expect him to play, and things still don't look comfortable for him underneath center or in the pocket. So I do believe the Titans can exploit the Jets, but I think they have to do it in a way where they run the football and allow their defense to win the game for them, because the Jets didn't show me much in regards to offense that I think is going to give the Tennessee Titans problems defensively.
Right. As we also talked about, the Jets gave up 8 consecutive scoring drives against the 49ers, which may have been the worst in their history, at least as far back as the records go. And that's never good when you can go back as far as the records go and say, that's never happened before. So I don't anticipate that happening on Sunday because the Titans offense isn't the 49ers offense. But as I said earlier, it would be wise, and I'm sure the Titans are not doing this, but it would be wise not to look at the Jets' defensive performance against the 49ers and get any sort of maybe newfound confidence in the offense's ability.
Here's another one I want to introduce, and Adam, I will challenge you with your research ability. Because I think this will not be the first time you hear this, or the last time you hear this between now and kickoff. But I'm curious about teams' records when you're an East Coast team playing Monday night on the West Coast and then going on the road again. With a short week of preparation. I wonder, especially with an older quarterback, and what that's going to look like. Like, I think a lot of people are curious. This has never happened before, a team coming back from Brazil and playing. Right now, they did have a little extra time because they played on Friday and not Sunday. But a lot of people I saw on ESPN, they predicted the Eagles might have a letdown this week because of that factor. But I am wondering about the Jets' short week. A lot of travel.
Well, the NFL didn't do them no favors.
Yeah.
Not one.
I'm sure when they saw, they were like, what?
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I will see if I can find it out for you by tomorrow at 11 o'clock when we will be back to continue our preview of Jets, Titans, silly underdog picks as well. Looking forward to that. Stillman and Company coming up next. 102.5, 106.3, The Game.
Be love on your people. Have a wonderful and blessed Wednesday. Peace.